Russell Brand gives a brutal reality check to Bill Maher and even brings the receipts on one of these. It's called A Piece of Paper, and I don't think Bill Maher was ready. I'm Vince for Resist the Mainstream. If you enjoy our content, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Why should you subscribe? Because that way we can keep bringing you content like this. And that said, let's get into today's clip. I think you're going to like this one.
I'd love to see your take on these facts that come from our content on our show. Like our research gleaned from some great journalists, and it's mostly okay to say this kind of meta-journalism. Right. We accumulate facts. We don't use anything that's not been endorsed in mainstream media. Let me hit you up with some of this stuff, and because I genuinely want to hear your take. But let me give you the whole thing as an overview, and then you can, as Bill Maher, because let's face it, no one else can do this.
Knock yourself out.
Okay, so former Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said recently a Russia-Ukraine peace deal was blocked by Western powers. We know that Boris Johnson visited Ukraine and counseled Zelensky against taking the peace deal that was on the table. That's just one thing. Let me hit you with all this stuff. Zelensky has vowed to retake Crimea, but Russia said that's the red line that will spark nuclear war. We know that, all right? Republican Senate leader Mitch McConnell said in December 2022, the most basic reasons for continuing to help Ukraine degrade and defeat the Russian invaders are cold, hard, practical American interests. And then I'll just widen this out a little. The Pentagon spent $14 trillion after 9/11. 55% of it went to for-profit defense contractors. The average American taxpayer contributed $2,000 to the military last year. More than 900 of that went to corporate military contractors. At least 15 politicians who shape U.S. defense policy have investments in military contractors.
Look at his face. Look at Bill Maher's face. He's like, uh-oh.
Contractors split their checks more or less evenly between Democrat and Republican candidates last year. And Biden appointed a former BlackRock MD to the cabinet, in particular to sort out the post-Ukrainian reconstruction.
Okay, stop.
These are good facts, Bill.
These are facts. Possibly. I don't have a fact checker here. I don't doubt any.
You're not going to need one.
Wait. But it's so far from the point. I mean, I feel like your antenna for conspiracy theories. I mean, you have a good antenna, and then sometimes it does not serve you well because, like, even if all this stuff is true, it's just more complicated than that. Both things can be true. It can be something that is a worthy endeavor to stop Russia from invading another country, and it also could be the case. It is the case, of course. People in the defense industry are looking to keep having reasons to make weapons and so forth. Yes. There are people who absolutely have a vested interest in war. Those are what your facts are saying. It doesn't mean, even if all that is true, and I would agree, there are people who have a vested interest in war. That doesn't mean, logically, it doesn't mean that every war is because of that.
Well, Bill, I just think that's a highly ironic take to say, because when liberals like you, rightly, by the way, opposed the Iraq war in 2003, I think many of you guys were called conspiracy theorists. Wow, they're just doing this because they want to enrich the military-industrial complex, or a lot of elites in this country have certain interests in regard to invading Iraq. What are you, anti-American? What are you, spreading some type of conspiracies? Yet here you and many other liberals are doing the same act when it comes to Ukraine in 2024, completely disregarding the people who may have concerns that maybe America's funding of the proxy war in Ukraine does not really have the nation's best interests at heart. I understand the point that you're making, but still kind of ironic to hear, because I don't think you guys really appreciated it when this same thinking exercise was done on you back in the day. So just a thought.
Wars can also be for another reason, and then these people glom onto that. That's called the shock doctrine. When you take advantage, when you take advantage of a crisis, it's going on. But it also could be the case that the war is a valiant endeavor. To a point.
I'm not excluding that.
Sounds just like George Bush, right?
Well, they bombed Ukraine to nothing. I mean, it's a very valid question now to ask.
What I'm saying is, do you think it's a coincidence that the mainstream media only reports on one aspect of this conflict? It only gives you one narrative. I am obviously not in a, look at my glittery trousers. I'm not in an opinion position to offer a definitive opinion on this. But what I will say is that sometimes when you talk about my antenna, right, this is what I think is like, either this war in Ukraine is motivated by a genuine and legitimate need to rightly and correctly support Ukrainian people who are under attack and suffering because of a war. Because when I've been looking at life, I notice how often humanitarianism is the motivation of the military-industrial complex. So you're always like, who can we help now? Who can we help now? And wouldn't it be great if we had a system that's like, oh, just to make sure that there is no other motivation, there can be no profit extracted from this conflict.
You know,
that the aid offered will not end up in Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, BAE systems. Wouldn't that be a beautiful system? Like, so as long as that is one of the possible reasons, isn't it the most likely reason?
Well, again,
that's a very good proposal, by the way. Imagine just how much the narrative on Ukraine would change if the burden of funding the war didn't necessarily attack the modern, normal American taxpayer, but rather the defense contractors or the politicians themselves. Notice how fast funding for the war would end and a peace deal would be made, right? It's very telling.
And now I feel
I'm talking about complexity.
I feel like now we're just making, you've made your point and I've made mine, and now I feel like we're repeating ourselves because, like, I'm just going to say again, and it sounds like you didn't hear me, like, both things can be true. It's just
but you said earlier,
not everything
like,
has to
Putin
be
is a monster and Zelensky is a hero, and I'm like, well, hang on, what about this? Because you think, like, how long do you think Zelensky is going to get support if his interests don't converge with the MIC?
Throwing your hands together like, oh, on the one hand, yeah, Putin is a murderer who just people out of windows and starts wars and all these crimes against humanity. And this guy has some shady business dealings. He's Ukrainian. He was born with a shady business dealing. I mean, that's what the country was known for before this. But okay, let's not.
I thought they were a free and fair democracy. I thought that's what this war was about, right? It's this dictator in Russia is invading this free democratic country, but now are you making the admission it's actually a very corrupt oligarchy there, and maybe that's not what really the war is about? Because here's the thing, and on the point that Bill Maher is making, I think if the neocons, if the military-industrial complex could just be honest about their motives to support this war, then maybe we could take their arguments a lot more seriously. Because in some ways, perhaps, arguing some type of American interest is really a more valid reason to be supporting this war than pretending like this is about some type of struggle of a dictator versus democracy, or a sovereign country versus a not sovereign country, or whatever. Because let's be real about this. Ukraine, first of all, is not a democracy. That's an established fact. That's very hard to argue, but they're still trying to tell us this, right? That's what the war is really about. It's like they have to lie to us. That's what it's really about. And then in the regards of Ukrainian sovereignty, it's like, no, either the debate is Ukraine will be a Russian puppet state or an American and Western puppet state. And if you want to make the argument that Ukraine would be better off if they were a Western puppet state, then maybe at least like you could make that argument. We could have it in good faith. But this is part of the problem, is they gaslight us about it. They tell us the generic like neocon cliches about how, oh, it's really about democracy or something, when we all know that that's very true. And of course, much like Bill Maher, as you saw here in this clip, they start to kind of disregard our facts as conspiracy theories, and it's very telling. But that said, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been Vince with Resist the Mainstream. Have a good day and peace.